Hello and welcome to the Cosy News Corner for open source news, and this is gonna be for the week of 46. And this is not something that I will produce highly, it's just talking through a bunch of news and then publishing. So this will go out on my YouTube channel, and I also will publish it on Hacker Public Radio as a podcast. So let's switch over so we can see some screens here, but I'm gonna talk about it. It's just to get some visuals on YouTube. The first news is Debian that now mandates that Rust should be used for APT, the Advanced Packaging Tool. And this is something that is talked about in their news group by a person called Julian Andres Claude, and he's a long-time developer in the Debian community and also a lead maintainer for this tool. So him going out and saying that this is the way forward, you should switch over so all the ports are using Rust going forward, and you have about 6 months to do it, or else, pretty much. So Debian will switch over to using Rust for this tool, and a lot of different things in Debian is actually switching over to using Rust. And a lot of things in the Linux world is starting to use Rust as well. We have some things in the kernel that is using Rust, and more of the tools in the GNU libraries will also go over to using Rust. And one thing that I want to mention here is that I listened to a talk about this by Brian Cantrill, and this was the complexity of simplicity. And this was a keynote that he was given at the TalosCon, and he's the Oxide co-founder and CTO, and this was in Amsterdam in October the 17th. And to quote him, he said, he went into Rust pretty skeptical, and honestly, he came back realizing that there were many things that he viewed to be essential complexity that were actually accidental complexity. And when it comes to Rust, one of the big things there was the error handling. So what did he mean by this? So the whole talk is about complexity, and making things that are simple is actually pretty hard. You need to put a lot of work in to make something simple. But if something is simple and easy to understand, it's less error prone. And when it comes to C and so on, you can write wonderful applications in C, but they might become very complex. And when you take that concept and take a new look at it, you can produce something like Rust that has taken a lot of thought and worked a lot in order to make the code less brittle, more simplistic, and easier to talk about and understand. So that is pretty much what he is aiming at here. I would guess, after looking at this talk, I would recommend you look at his talk as well and listen to it. It's a lot of good and fun information. He's a great speaker, I think. Next up, we're going to talk about some vulnerabilities in Rust. Not particularly Rust, but one thing written in Rust. So this is the sudo rs, so the sudo command written in Rust. Not public anymore at the moment, not the main thing used in Debian or Ubuntu, but it's a rework, and they are working against it and trying to get it into Ubuntu as a stable release. And they have found 2 bugs, and they are not great, but it's good that they actually find these before any release. So the first vulnerability was that the password could be exposed due to timeouts. That is never good. And another thing is that it incorrectly recorded the wrong user in a timestamp. And the reason that's bad is that some authentication could be reused if you have cached credentials. So it's something that they need to look into. And both of these were reported by 2 different medias here. So the first media about Debian Rust was reported by Stephen Vogue Nichols at the News Stack. And then we also have this report by sudo rs by Sudrav Randa that is writing for its FOSS. So I'm going to mention these as well, so you know who have written the story and who should have credit for it. Next up, I was also reading another story at the News Stack, was written by Lorraine Larsson, and this is about Snapchat. And Snapchat has actually released an open source framework that they are using in order to write applications for iOS, Mac OS, and also Android. And it's writing code in JavaScript in order to create GUI components and work with those kind of tooling in native code. So you write JavaScript and then this framework will compile it to native apps. So if you're looking for a cross-platform UI framework, then perhaps this Snapchat open source library is something that you need to look into. It could be an option for you at least. And now over to our first piece of AI news. And there is a bunch of AI news out there. And now we're going to talk about a company called Solo.io. So not AI, I-O. So this is another title that is written by Heather Joslin at the News Stack. And this is talking about an agent registry for AI agents. So when you have these kind of endpoints with MPC, this protocol, this model context protocol, where you can talk to agents on different sites, there is a bunch of different agent registries out there, but most of them are closed source and behind paywalls and so on. But Solo.io has a solution that they have been using for a while now, and they have now released their agent registry as open source. So if you need this, then you can install that and use it locally on your organization. I have not looked into either agents or agent registries yet. That is still a blind spot of mine, but perhaps in the future, if it's interesting, I could look into this more. So next up, we have a little bit of a controversy, and it has been a problem for a while, still in the AI field. And this was reported by Surav Rudayan from its FOSS, and it's FFmpeg. And they are pretty angry about a lot of different contributions from AI. So again, we create these kind of CVSs where we say, this is a very bad bug that you have in your application, you need to fix it. And it's AI slop pretty much in this CVEs. And they are pretty fed up with it, and they are just a bunch of volunteers that are trying to create the best movie viewing and movie managing system. So FFmpeg is where you can take a bunch of different clips, either audio or movies, and you can do operations on them. And they can read pretty much any video file that has ever been made. It's an awesome application, but it's just made by a couple of interesting parties, and none of them are working none of them are really getting paid for it, or at least not paid well. So they are pretty fed up. They are swarmed with all these kind of issues, and they don't have the actual capacity to solve them all. And they have reached out to Google and said, we need some funding here if we're going to work on this full time and so on. So it has been a really bad time for the FFmpeg guys. And this is not the first time that AI has been used in order to swamp developers with either bad PRs or with problems that isn't really a problem. It's just something that someone found and reported because they thought that that could be a huge problem. And another person that I've talked a bit about this is Daniel Stenberg, and he is the sole developer of the curl project. And he had a time where he just ignored CVEs because there were so many of them and they were not really good either pull requests or actual issue reports. So AI will create a bunch of slop and will make it much harder to do development in this case. Another person that also has reported this is Stephen J. von Niklas at the Newsstack. So I read both of those reports, but they are talking about similar things behind the FFmpeg and their problem with all these CVEs. Next up, we have Ubuntu. That is now released information about their commitment for handling releases and LTS releases and giving security and support. And this have been a big topic in the Microsoft world, where they now not give any more security fixes for Windows 10, and they are leaving a lot of people behind that can't install Windows 11 because they have too old computers and so on. So this have been in the news a lot, and a lot of people are angry on Microsoft, and Microsoft have been pretty good with creating both security fixes and supporting their operating system. I looked back, and both Windows 8 and Windows 10 has had 10 years of support from their initial release until pretty much a month ago, where they stopped supporting Windows 10, and then they said, okay, if you're in the EU or if you have enough Microsoft points or want to send some information to us so we can benefit of having all your information, then you can continue using Windows 10, or else you need to upgrade to Windows 11. But they have a 10 years support cycle, and remember how large the team at Microsoft is. Ubuntu is a very serious player in the Linux world, but they are not as large as Microsoft, and they have now released and said, we will support our operating system up to 15 years with some caveats. So the standard maintenance window for each release of LTS, which is the long-term supported version, will be 5 years. So they give support and security fixes for 5 years for all their customers, even if you have not given them any money at all. And if you are a pro subscriber, which I am as well, and if you are an individual, not a company, those are also free, or at least they were free when I became a pro subscriber. You will get another 5 years. So year 6 to 10 will also be supported by this pro subscription, and you can also call in and get support by their support team. Next 5 years, year 11 to 15, is something they call a legacy add-on for security coverage and support. And this is also for pro subscribers, but they will add an extra fee of 50% for those 5 extra years. But still, I think that is a very small cost if you really need to have old versions of Ubuntu, and having something that you can run in production for 15 years without upgrading, that is pretty cool. So I think this is actually a really cool thing that they have come out with, and it's also perhaps a little bit of pointing at Microsoft that you could have done this as well. You have the resources. So I think it's a pretty cool. This was reported by Surav Rudaigan at It's the FOSS. Another thing reported by the same person is the Firefox built-in AI. So Firefox has had built-in AI for a while now, where you had an extra feature that you can open up in order to summarize pages and so on, and do different queries to different AI agents online. And because we all are starting to use AI, they have now taken it a way forward. So before, you have this classical tabs where you search for things or browse the web. And if you were in a case where you needed to be more privacy minded, perhaps you needed to visit a site that you didn't want it to be saved on your computer, you could go into privacy mode. Of course, still every call goes through your ISP and so on, so somebody could look up what you have actually looked at, but at least it doesn't store any information on your computer. That's privacy mode. The next mode that they have is the AI window. So if you open up an AI window, then you have those tools ready at hand in that concept. And there have been a bunch of backlash on this AI window. People don't really want it and so on, or at least they try to be before anyone creating a lot of information about this. So they are saying that this is something that is optional. You don't need to use it. It's available to you if you have the need, but you don't need to use it. So don't be angry at us. But they haven't really come out and told us what it actually could do. It's a way of browsing the web in an agentic way, but they haven't really told us how it actually works, how it will look, or anything like that. It's something that they are working for, but it's coming soon. So that is something that could be interesting to look into and see when it actually is released, and have some first-hand knowledge about and check out when it actually is released. So that was reported by Sudrav Ruda from Itsfos, and also from Ajit Verma at the Distilled. So next up, we're going to talk about a Linux distro called Nitrux 5.0.0. So this is the 5 big release that came out this week as well. And it's some Linux system for modern computers on an immutable foundation. And it's powered by OpenRC instead of systemd. And it has hyperland and so on. So built for simplicity and predictability and maintainability is their catchphrase for this operating system. And looking at it is very Mac-like. So it looks like any of the newer Mac OS. And perhaps that's good, so you have familiarity. It seems like you have multiple desktops and so on, and also some performance and other metrics right in the operating system. I haven't worked with this, haven't tried it out, but it's an option, and it looks interesting, and it was released this week. And last but not least, we are going to talk about a new project that has been open sourced, and it pretty much have been open sourced all the way. It's just started off this week that they are released, that it was in the making. And looking at the commits, it's very, very, they are actually working on it right now. So last commit was yesterday, and this is a Vulkan-based implementation of DirectX 7. So for applications and games that are pretty old, they are now trying to create this layer that you can use in order to play them in Linux under Wine. So this is interesting and something that is in the making, and we'll probably get into some Wine release later on, but it's just starting work now. So we already have a bunch of implementation for DirectX 12 and so on. So we already have a lot of Windows native support for newer games and applications, but they are slowly but surely working their way back in order to support even more applications and games. So this was what I wanted to cover today. I hope that you found this interesting.